change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
What exists, reality itself, is gorgeous. It is the plenum, the fullness of total joy. The universe is a celebration. It's a fireworks show to celebrate that existence is. Wowee.
For those of us seeking a life of meaning and purpose, capturing fulfillment in every moment of now, seeking the truths of our reality so we can live this life to its fullest. This is the Live This Life podcast. And I'm your host, Hugh Cummings. I'm here to inspire you to ask yourself the question every day. Are you living? Or are you killing time? What's going on, everyone? Happy New Year. This is the first episode of 2024. And to do this one right, to start this year off right, we're going to dive back into the book Oneness by Rasha. For those of you who might be new to the podcast, this book is now the third book that we featured on the show, and we are fortunate enough to feature this amazing book. This one is on the heels of The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which we read in season 1 and 2, and then followed that book by a short series of books called Secrets of the Universe. And now it's time to feature this amazing text, which happens to be one of my all-time favorites. I love this one. And basically, we're reading these every few episodes, trying to get through the thing. It's extremely long, so it's probably going to take us quite a while. But if I were a little bit better at getting show episodes out more regularly, wouldn't be an issue. But for those of you who follow the show a lot, you know that I've got a lot of things going on. But 2024 is really going to be the year that I've set intention for. I know you know I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, but in this year, because metrics all get measured in years, this year is going to be huge. And one of that's going to be consistency. So being consistent, we're going to see a lot more of this book in this upcoming season. I've said many times, this book is sort of like a Bible to me. It's like a Bible of sorts because it gives so much non-dogmatic guidance. It's stuff that's really resonated with me so much over the years. And, this book, it was written by the amazing author, Rasha, who granted us the rights to this book. And the story goes that she downloaded a lot of these conversations, these bits of knowledge over a series of 5 years with a consciousness that she calls oneness, and that called itself oneness to her. And over the course of the 5 years, she basically compiled all of that and put it into this amazing text. And once you've listened, if you've already listened along, you know what I'm talking about. If not, go check out some of those other episodes. I will link them all down in the show notes. But those episodes and the stuff that's in them is just, it's amazing. I guess I kind of forgot along the way, just it's been so long since I've read this book. I bring it with me a lot. I'll dive into it every once in a while, just on trips and long journeys and stuff like that. But I have not gone cover to cover to this book in years. So it's been a great privilege to be able to do that again. So once I start diving more into it and we start getting deeper into its content and you start listening on a more regular basis, you will see exactly what I'm talking about as far as some of the amazing bits of knowledge that come out of this book. So stay tuned, follow along, and keep on listening to every single episode that we're going to have coming out with this book. And before we dive in too much, I wanted to check out a review that came in via Apple Podcasts. Those of you who follow along with the show know that I love these reviews. I love where they all come in at certain different times, good, bad, or indifferent. We've been fortunate enough to have mostly good reviews along the way. But yeah, all of them been 4 or 5 star rated. So thank you all so much for all of that. This one happens to be a 5-star review, and it's titled Episode 127. And this one came in by someone calling themselves L Crystal. And looks like it came out of the Philippines as well. So I'm going to read this one. It says, just heard this episode about finding self-worth beyond just helping others, and it's spot on. Heath gets real about his own struggle with looking for validation from others and how it sometimes left him feeling unappreciated. He shares some killer tips on balancing helping people and taking care of your own needs. The big takeaways reflect on why you're helping. Step back sometimes to see your true value and remember, you can't please everyone. It's all about knowing your worth and living true to yourself, not just meeting others' expectations. This episode is a real eye-opener for anyone caught up in people-pleasing. Definitely worth a listen. Thank you very much, El Crystal, for leaving that review. And if you want to leave your own, you can leave one for this show. Head to whatever platform you happen to be listening on. If you're watching on local television, it's not really a place to do it, but you can head to YouTube and leave a review there. You can comment on certain episodes, or if you want to send me a personal message, you can just do that on email at connect@livethislife.org. That's CONNECT @livethislife.org. I will read your review on the show, and if you have any questions or ideas for an episode as well, hit us up there and we'll likely consider it for an episode. We're really good at getting back to people on that avenue. So if you want to explore a conversation through email, hit us up there and we will maybe turn your question into a full episode. So please leave those ratings and reviews. Those help us reach so many people. There is a sea of 3 million podcasts out there, and you've heard me say this a million times, but it just happens to be this place in the Philippines where this review was left from. We happen to be charting really high there. It ranked number 3 in spirituality in the Philippines in the last week of 2023. So thank you for everybody in the Philippines that is listening to this show, and everybody else out there. Anything that you do, like putting reviews up on social media, particularly if you leave one on Apple Podcasts, it's one of the biggest places people reach us. It will help us reach so many more hearts and minds of the people out there in this world. So please keep it up. All right, so in this last chapter reading that we did with Oneness on chapters 5 and 6, we were discussing the role of the adversary in our lives that tends to end up popping up, and sometimes the repeat lessons that we have to learn by those adversaries, and sometimes realizing that we might be the adversaries in their book as well. In this particular chapter, in this chapter reading of 7 and 8, we're going to be diving into the role of intention and how an energetic buildup of conflicts can really depend on the collective. It depends on us as individuals, but how our individual energy can lend momentum to the entire collective of humanity. So we are going to start off chapter 7, and these often have very long titles, some of the chapters. So the title for chapter 7 is The Power of Intention, the energetic prescription for world peace, the part every individual plays in the creation of global conflict, and taking responsibility for the effort of every action upon the whole. Right now is all there is. Right now is all there ever will be. Right now is what you have to come into physical form to experience. And right now is the concept upon which your core understandings of the true nature of your reality are based. There is no past. All there is that which can be created. And creation, by definition, can only happen right now. Your world, as your experience has shown it to be, is based on a system of action and reaction, of cause and consequence, of linear perceptions based upon beginnings and endings. In fact, none of these concepts are as your experience has shown them to be. Your perceptions are but a measuring device by which you can gauge the extent to which you're able to translate intent into form. For the sake of argument, let us eliminate form for just a moment. What remains is pure intention. That is what is. That is the essence of creation. That is the foundation upon which all else rests. Your intention in any given moment sets the stage for the full manifestation of your experience. There are no random events. Things do not just happen to anyone. Intention is the cohesive element that translates the conceptual into form. In these times of unprecedented acceleration of the vibration that manifests as your reality, the time lag between the inception of one's intent and its materialization as, quote, form or, quote, event is negligible. And the correlation between intent and manifestation will become obvious as the time lag that separates them continues to diminish. Ultimately, as your realm of experience ascends into higher ranges of vibration, manifestation will be instantaneous. For some amongst you who resonate at the higher ends of the energy spectrum, that encompasses your reality, the experience of instant manifestation is at hand. And with those capabilities goes the responsibility for the effect of one's intent, not only upon one's own circumstances, but upon the reality experienced by all. What is called for in these times of great change is a corresponding shift in conscious awareness. What is happening to a greater or lesser extent within each of you who bridges the gap in consciousness between the world of what was and that which increasingly is coming to be is a systemic relinquishing of the obsolete patterns of response that would continue to manifest as outmoded reality that increasingly lacks relevance. Within each of you, there is a radical shift in perception taking place, and each is undergoing a transformation of the ideals that form the basis of your responses to the moment-to-moment experiences in your life. Situations where great importance had been placed in maintaining a particular stance are now perceived as less crucial. The need to be, quote, right in all instances and to defend the perspective at all costs suddenly gives way to the need for harmony and for a spontaneous perception of the perspective of the adversary. The need to triumph over another, regardless of the circumstance, is based upon the needs of ego. And this ego-centered state of separation is the one overriding factor that seeks to undermine the impetus toward unification and oneness, toward which all energy throughout creation is focused. The process of relinquishing one's conditioned attachment to learned responses fostered by ego has been a gradual one. Now the momentum of accelerated vibration results in dramatic shifts in consciousness in all who are attuned to these things. Interactions are more intense, and the emotions evoked are calculated to take the underlying point of the exercise to the extreme, such that interactions appear to be caricatures of behavior that might be expected ordinarily. When the heat of the moment passes, one is left to wonder, what on earth was that all about? And when one recognizes certain reactions to be out of proportion to the circumstances that triggered them, ideally, that awareness calls up for scrutiny of one's own participation in such dramas, and it offers a respite from the self-righteous needs of ego that might blind one to the truth, underlying the dynamics in question. Ideally, the cost of having to be right is blatantly apparent when, in the winning, what might have been truly of value has been lost. Extremes of emotion are not to be expected, both within oneself and from those key players with whom one interacts. Be prepared for dramas in your day-to-day experience that are calculated to stimulate learned behaviors that are rooted in limitation and ego. Attitudes that may be harbored beneath the whitewash of denial might be unmasked and presented for you for your careful examination and transformation. You can expect opportunities to abound in your experience of these times, designed to accelerate a shift in consciousness that is vying to keep pace with your amplified abilities to manifest your reality. The state of beingness toward which you now travel at unheard of speed is one that the inception of your intent and its manifestation happens simultaneously. This level of capability would be incalculably dangerous in the hands of beings invested in self-serving orientation, and the corresponding extremes of experience that manifest prior to the attachment of those levels are calculated to drive the point home, unquestionably, for those still rooted in resistance. For the shift in awareness will be experienced by all. Ultimately, the momentum toward the state of oneness commands the harmonization of the intent of all. Energy that is out of sync with that momentum will feel the consequences of that discord and will be hard-pressed to keep the pace with the parameters of the reality that is rapidly coming to be. Self-protective mechanisms, such as rationalizations for behavior that would justify one's stance in a given episode, only serve to prolong the length of time that might be spent relinquishing one's need to control the outcome of certain kinds of interaction. Eventually, there is no longer the need to react to circumstances calculated to provoke a predictable response in a conditioned way. When one is able to let go of the need to maintain command and to emerge from an encounter in a position of dominance, the accompanying energetic charge is diminished and the intensity of the interaction de-escalates proportionately. Ultimately, one ceases to manifest such levels of conflict entirely, as the energy that magnetizes them would not be present. This, in essence, is the energetic prescription for the, quote, peace, to which so many on your planet pay lip service in these times. To truly create peace on a global scale, it is necessary to step back from the overview of global conflict and to perceive the interactions that precipitate it as what they truly are, manifestations of energy. To shift an environment in which discord reigns supreme and is unyielding, it is a futile effort to enter into a duel where bravado collides head-on with bravado. Hostility met with hostility simply breeds escalated hostility and reinforces the vibrational building blocks of the situation into ones that will continue to manifest for more of the same. To shift the energy underlying these ongoing global situations, it is necessary to address the energy that comprises them. Each participant, regardless of how inconsequential the involvement, adds a piece to the energetic equation. A mindset of dominance at all costs breeds as its ongoing manifestation the vibration of separation rooted in ego, which impedes the momentum of the entire human race in its journey toward oneness with all creation. The key to removing the stagnant energies of global conflict lies in the recognition of the need to shift the energies of the interpersonal dynamics of all participants. It is a responsibility of every individual to become aware of the patterns of response that are calculated to sustain the diminished energies of separation. A response that is non-reactive to a provocative encounter serves to dissipate the energy charge and provide the conditions for harmonization of the mutual concerns of those in question. By consistently reacting to conflict with the conscious intention not to, quote, fuel the fire, by asserting your position and striving to emerge as the, quote, victor, you affect the energy of each encounter the highest possible way. For when presented with the non-combative response, the adversary is not provided with the energetic tools with which to further escalate the conflict, thereby diffusing the energy that individual brings to the encounter. By taking command of a potential conflict by consciously sidestepping it energetically, each individual makes a contribution, which is experienced globally. The whole is merely the sum of its parts. This is the basis for the entire thrust of the impetus towards reunification with all creation that marks these times. Within the momentum that drives the unprecedented shift in consciousness so many are experiencing is the opportunity to recognize that one truly does make a difference. With every word, with every gesture, with every choice, with the underlying sentiments and beliefs one holds at the heart level, one adds a measure to the energy of the whole. In truth, all are responsible energetically for co-creating global conflict, and all are capable of making a measurable difference in the efforts towards world peace by taking responsibility for the energy projected in every encounter with every fellow being with one whom shares the adventure known as life. It is with that mindset in the forefront of your consciousness that the transcendent being within you moves forward in these times. When you are clear that the world-shattering situations taking place around the globe affect every life form with which you share the reality of existence with here, you begin to realize and to affect with that very awareness the intricate web of interconnectedness of all of it. It is far too easy to turn a blind eye to events happening a world away and to delude yourself into believing that such situations do not directly affect you personally. The advent of instantaneous information with which your dimension has now equipped itself eliminates the excuse prior civilizations might have for detachment from global responsibility for all events, regardless of where they're taking place. Your civilization does not now have the luxury of that excuse. The inclination of most people to absolve themselves of responsibility for the world situation at large, which historically could be relegated to being uninformed, cannot be dismissed so easily in these times. For each of you who lives and breathes here carries the full measure of the capacity to create, in the now moment, the world as the divine intention conceived it to be. You are on the very edge of starting a new frontier of experience in the days now dawning. You stepped into the very edge of your capacity for godliness in human form, and some have peered over the edge of the cliff and recognized their God-given abilities to co-create the world as it was conceived to be. Know that there are no limitations here, save those that you claim as your own. The ascension and harmonization of all life in your realm is a simultaneous state of beingness, which is an ongoing and ever evolving. And it is touched by every breath taken, by every word spoken, and by every blessed stroke of your collective materialized intent. Let each action be one that is inspired consciously on your own part, and you will make a meaningful contribution. Let every gesture be reflective of your awareness, of your own interconnectedness with life, and that creative act will carry the enhanced vibrational charge needed collectively to effect a shift in awareness for all. Do not delude yourself into thinking that the world situation is, quote, out of control. Quite the contrary. The situation is very much, quote, under control. It is under the moment-to-moment control of the collective mindset, which co-creates and recreates it in the ever-evolving moment of now. The adverse conditions with which much of your world is grappling in these times are not the victim-oriented results of random conditions. All of it is energy-based. All of it has been created energetically by the unified force of the abilities of each and every being here, and every bit of it could be shifted instantaneously to conditions reflective of the ideal of all creation, where the hearts of all focused in that intention. That result can be brought about. That result will be brought about. All that remains are the options of what will be experienced and by whom in the process of that shift. The momentum toward unification and oneness with all creation is underway. The force of that momentum is a fact of life itself and cannot be impeded. For the power of love is quite literally unstoppable, exercising its capability to manifest fully and to create itself its vibrational essence in every conceivable expression of life. What is optional are the exquisite heights of joy to which those aligned with divine intent are destined to travel. What is optional are the traumas that will be co-created and experienced by those whose choices reflect their embodiment of separation from that momentum. What is optional is the sense of living limbo of those who are marginally aware of the reality of their ability to make a difference in these times, and whose reluctance to honor their instincts and defy consensus thinking keeps them frozen in the eternal past. Life is moving forward, dancing with the wind and harmonizing with the joy of the newborn breath of every life form on the planet. And this is the dance of creation that beckons you in these times. This is the reality that you're capable of manifesting at this crossroad of time and space that you perceive as your world. And this is the only moment that will take you the full distance and deliver you directly unto your destination. This moment, this very moment right now. Short and sweet, that is the end of chapter 7. And I'm going to make a little bit of a statement on this one. So for those of us who, and I hate to sound pretentious in saying like those of us who are awakened and not, there are some of us that I do feel that are sort of awake to the game that's being played across humanity. And over, I want to say, the last decade or so, I very much have become aware of the game of division. And I've seen it in so many different instances. And it feels like at every turn, the flames are being fanned of division in so many different ways. There's an analogy that I've seen on social media a lot lately that you can take a ton of red ants and black ants and put them in a jar, and they will not fight with each other until the jar is shooken up, and then they will go at it with each other. And somebody is basically throwing all of us in that jar, and they're shaking it up at every instance possible. It seemed like politics does it. COVID did it to a certain extent, which got political in and of itself. And it seems like at every single turn, the media and all of the players that literally control our world from every aspect, they will fan the flames of division. Because if we do unite and we come together and we do all of the things that this chapter was talking about, that we co-create a reality that is inclusive, it is one that is nurturing, it is one that has consideration for your fellow man, the unity that comes out of that and the strength that comes out of that unity is something that is absolutely immeasurable. And it's sort of an experiment that I would love to somehow see come manifest. It's one of the major reasons why I continue to do this podcast. It's one of the things that fuels my fire. It's one of the things that, I guess I'm adding to it in some microscopic way. I feel like I'm doing certain things that are adding to the unification rather than the division. And it's very tempting. It's very tempting to get polarized and tribal in so many of these different things. And just looking at what happened late in 2023, it was just a huge tribalization of just the Palestine and Israel thing. And, everybody's pointing fingers at each other. And it seems like there could be no other larger scale type of division that basically permeates every single country on the planet. Race sometimes isn't a big thing in certain regions, and Democrat and Republican it's completely non-existent in certain places. But the conflict that's happening in the Middle East, it seems like that does pervade many different societies, and it's a global division. And I think it's one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one, they could have really split us down the middle on. And it seems like that was sort of a Hail Mary. And in a sense, it's working. In another sense, there's many people who are disengaging from it and trying to do what they can to not so much rally against what's happening on either side, but trying to rally for peace. It's one of those big things I've talked about many times with Mother Teresa, how she was against a protest against the war in Vietnam. She would not go to a protest against it, but if there was a march for peace, she was going to be there. And I think if more of us had that mindset of we're marching towards something that is positive rather than against something that's negative, we would see a lot of things transcended. And I think this chapter was speaking a lot to that mindset and that way of thinking that could permeate on a global scale the entire collective of humanity. So let's get started on chapter 8. This one, another long title. And this one is the title for chapter 8 is Anticipating Extremes of Experience as Life Themes Are Brought to Closure. Daring to Dream. Facing the Void. Understanding the Blind Leap of Faith. Attaining the Perspective of Multidimensionality. Get a drink here before we get started because I'm getting already dry the throat. Okay, so when a soul emerges into a conscious awareness, the layers of experience which have been carried forth through eons of incarnate reality begin to dissipate the energetic charge that would have magnetized repeated examples of major life themes. Were completion not imminent? As one approaches the fullness of the scope of inherent in a given theme, the charge carried forth builds a crescendo, providing particular poignant episodes that epitomize the lesson in question, lest there be any doubt whatsoever regarding the underlying issues. Do not be alarmed. As you become aware and the issues become obvious to you, when you find yourself immersed in extremes of discordant situations, it is you who called forth these dramas. Not consciously, of course, for in your own eyes, you would probably be above such encounters entirely. But at a vibrational level, the powerful energetic charge still present within your energy field is capable of manifesting opportunities to explore those themes. Despite the fact that you may have attained clarity and full understanding of the dynamics involved. There is more required than one grand aha as a light bulb of recognition bursts into the view of your conscious mind to release fully the energetic remnants of the life theme. Do not feel, as these powerful episodes present themselves, that the experience is evidence of spiritual backsliding on your part. Quite the contrary. By virtue of the fact that you have manifested extremes of experience, despite being in a space of heart-centered clarity with the issue in question, you can feel confident that you are at completion with it. You will wish to respond in ways that will not re-escalate the energy charge that is being released in the process of drawing certain chapters to a close. Real awareness of the arduous process through which you've journeyed will allow you to respond with detachment and maximize your potential for bringing recurring dramas to a close. With the advent of the acceleration of your ability to manifest your day-to-day experience, there is no longer the luxury of deluding yourself into believing that circumstances, quote, just happen randomly. There are no longer the excuses for ignoring coincidences that victim consciousness provide. It becomes obvious when the backlash is virtually instantaneous that you've participated in a major way in the very creation of your own worst nightmares. That initial clarity sets the stage for an enlightened overview of the full epic, and you're able to see the threads that have become intertwined with the tapestries of turmoil and triumph that illustrate your history. From the perspective of the overview, one can enjoy the humor and the absurdity of some of it, and one can marvel at the antics and at one's own blindness to what now seems obvious and avoidable. When those types of circumstances can no longer, quote, push your buttons, your own sidestepping of the energetic hooks help to create conditions where the opportunities do so cease to manifest. These times of completion are about setting the stage for new kinds of experience. When the energetic remnants of those dramas have been swept away, you'll be ready and able to create a very different kind of adventure. The reality you will be co-creating with the loving brothers and sisters with whom you share these times is one in which the sweetness of the highest possible outcome for all is manifested automatically. For all will know that it cannot be otherwise. In this state of spontaneous creation, one expects to experience the best case scenario in all circumstances, and is rewarded with that as one's reality. The question then becomes, what is it that one wants to experience in one's reality? It is less a question of what is possible, for under these conditions, all things are possible. There are no limitations. One's reality manifests as a melding of will and desire, a bonding of intent, and of one's joy and passion in the act of that creation. Life takes on an entirely new perspective, as one comes to understand life as a chronicle of one's heart desire, coming to fruition and to experience its enjoyment as one's birthright. This shift is subtle, and when you've made that shift, you may not be consciously aware that you've actually turned the corner until confronted by an awareness that the obstacles and impediments which had come to be taken for granted are somehow no longer there. One ceases to anticipate those setbacks and thus stops creating them. For what one expects to experience lays the groundwork for the manifestation of that experience in one form or another. When one expects and anticipates the optimum outcome for all concerned, that outcome cannot help but be manifested as reality. Under the conditions of the world on whose very edge you stand poised, that state of the instantaneous materialization of elevated intent is the standard by which all experience will come to be measured. Naturally, free will is very much at play in the new paradigm. One will be fully capable of manifesting disaster scenarios as well as triumphant ones, and one will become keenly aware of the power of one's thoughts, emotions, and focused intent. Instant manifestation of ill will or negative focus are the potential pitfalls. In a world where you get exactly what you create energetically, virtually at once, and the wielding of this newfound power by some is a temptation that will be met by instantaneous reprisal, where the severity of the lesson would not easily be ignored or forgotten. In preparation for those conditions, you're equipping yourself in these times with a response mechanism designed to circumvent the pitfalls of ego-focused reaction. As the vibration of your world continues to accelerate at unprecedented speed, the potential gift of instantaneous manifestation has been placed in the hands of those of you who serve as the forerunners of the times to come. One by one, as each of you comes to the completion with your life theme issues and adds a measure of elevated vibration to the energy of the whole, the conditions of the collective become standardized and are experienced by all. Some will manifest their full magnificence and experience their attunement to the oneness in the transition. Some will succumb to their own stubborn refusal to yield to the momentum of life itself, yearning in unison for oneness, and suffer the trials of separation under intensified conditions. No one will escape an awareness that monumental change is at hand, and no soul, however lost in denial, will be able to emerge from the times to come untouched by the knowledge that responsibility for one's reality rests with oneself. For all will recognize that reality is a vivid illustration of their own choices. The choices that are made under the conditions of the new world of instantaneous manifestation will be choices made from conscious intent rather than being the reflexes rooted in happenstance, born of a diminished reality. When used as a tool for conscious manifestation of circumstance that reflects the highest good of the collective, the ability to manifest one's heart desire in physical form becomes the means by which each individual, in the sanctity of his own consciousness, can harmonize his personal will with that of the whole. When each and every being is clearly focused on the ramifications of his own actions upon the collective, that awareness is reflected exponentially throughout all of creation, adding that measure of elevated perspective and harmonized intent to all that is. Likewise, when one is harmonized with the heart center, with the heart focus of the collective of universal well-being, the vibration on the elevated intent of the totality is reflected in what is manifested by each and every aspect of the whole. This is the ultimate expression of the popular saying that each being, quote, makes a difference. Indeed, each of you does more than you know. The challenge in the emerging state of beingness is to attain balance between the perspective of the overview and the personal ramification of one's choices. When choices are made from the perspective of personal or material gain at the expense of the collective, that vibration of separation sets into motion an energy configuration that contributes to the manifestation of circumstances that would reinforce one's sense of separation. By opting for self-serving solutions, one creates the conditions energetically under which detrimental situations are experienced that reflect the underlying messages of separateness. It could become easy once one is keyed into such an energetic spiral to relive some of the old beliefs that might have manifested more gradually under former vibrational conditions. And one may lose sight of the underlying message in all choices in the new paradigm, either the reflection of one's alignment with the momentum of unification or the reflection of one's adherence to the illusion of separation from oneness. Ultimately, one becomes clear in one's focus, and the option selected at each crossroads reflects choices whose ramifications result in the highest expression for all. When viewed from that perspective, there is truly no choice that would be of a lesser benefit to the individual while simultaneously serving the universal highest good. Applying these principles now by demonstrating your awareness of how you create your experience is possible to set in motion a new standard of conditioned responses that reflects and manifests constantly the highest possible outcome of any interaction. As each of you becomes aware of the true nature of your reality and how you set about to create the circumstances that memorialize your mindset in a given moment, you're able to step back from the circumstances of your life and attain an overview. Ideally, that vision is a melding, not only of your history in a given area of experience, but of your aspirations and dreams of where you might be headed, where the possible outcome to manifest for you. When you permit yourself the luxury of openly, unabashingly fantasizing about what it is you truly yearn for and dream of, you set into motion the energetic parameters for manifesting your heart's desire. Until you give free expression to the limitless vision you keep under wraps, you cannot by definition create in your reality. When you operate your life from the mindset of unworthiness to have your heart's desire, when the thrust of your energy is not daring to ask for what you truly want out of fear of disappointment, that disappointment is virtually guaranteed. Were you to envision yourself in circumstances where your deepest longings were made manifest, without reservation, without compromise, you might begin to experience the radical shift in circumstances of your life that would provide for you the very evidence that you do indeed create your life. Were you to dare to risk relinquishing the limitation-based thinking that keeps you anchored to the experience of disappointment in the areas that matter to you most, you might just experience a glimpse of liberation from those patterns. And were you to take the blind leap needed to catapult yourself out of your energetic rut entirely, you might find yourself able to circumvent a good measure of the repetition of events that are the norm in this process. That blind leap is one that is taken not within the confines of your mind, but is sourced within the depths of your heart of hearts. It is here, in the very core of your energetic being, that the connection awaits you that will ultimately carry you the full distance. When you recognize the level of connectedness that you carry within your very own heart and experience the love that is harbored there for you, you will have taken the first tentative steps toward that leap. For the leap in faith comes not in one's denial or one's repression of fear of the, quote, void that is virtually universal. The leap in faith comes of daring to face the void and know it for the manifestation of the illusion of separation that it is, in fact. In order to transcend this, the ultimate fear, the fear that one is actually alone in this odyssey called life, it is necessary to surrender totally to that fear. In order to know experientially the state of fearlessness that comes of aligning with one's God self, it is necessary to undergo what might be considered to be a series of initiations. These manifestations as experiences of one's fear of the state of disconnectedness are in fact illusory devices that you've created for yourself so that you might have the means of proving otherwise. By consciously choosing in one's darkest hour to reject the vision of hopelessness that appears inevitable and to choose instead the knowingness that the outcome will reflect your highest possible good, you open the doorway within to the place of loving trust that will lead you home. This blind leap in faith has been spoken of throughout time immemorial and is known by every culture throughout your planetary history. Yet most address this reference with an air of mockery in light of the very real seeming circumstances at hand. What is called for is not bravery and heroism in that moment of truth, but total detachment. A level of surrender is called for that has released all attachment to outcome. This level of surrender is achieved when one stands at the very edge of one's gravest fear and knows in that moment that there's nothing to fear. Embrace yourself in these times and acknowledge yourself for the extraordinary progress you're making as a soul in every waking moment. The very fact that you're drawn to reading these words attests to an openness on your part to aligning with the momentum of this multidimensional journey. Know that to have done so reflects great courage on your part, and that to continue to do so despite the resistance of consensus thinking puts you in the forefront of those destined to emerge in the new world relatively unscathed. The opportunity to circumvent some of the mountains that most will manifest and choose to scale lies in your ability in the moment at hand to release the need to control the result or the dynamics of any circumstance in which one finds oneself. By consciously shifting one's intent to one of conscious allowance of the manifestation of the highest good of the collective, one enhances the opportunity to manifest the brightest possible outcome for oneself. In so doing, one is able to secure a state of beingness that is unencumbered by eons of trial and error and is free to explore the joys of manifestation of divine will in alignment with one's own. This is the blessed state of being toward which you strive in the present period. Yet it is possible to manifest this state effortlessly merely by relinquishing the need to embody separateness and embracing wholeheartedly the truth of the multidimensionality in which you have aligned your vision. What is meant is not that one would relinquish identity, for surely one is able to remain autonomy, but rather that one would simultaneously embody one's knowingness of the full scope of one's being while manifesting the persona in physical form that you know to be you. Thus, in the elevated stages of the transformational process, one would actually be the physical embodiment of the full multidimensional spectrum of the beingness that is, in fact, you. By opening to the reality of that heightened state of being, one would have the perceptions possible in the embodiment of each of a range of levels of identity while retaining self-awareness as you. And the response mechanism would be that of the enlightened perspective made manifest. One would retain the knowingness that comes of incarnate experience while sourcing the heightened knowingness that comes of true multidimensionality. Each of you who is focused as a traveler on the path to oneness is capable of functioning at these levels at any time. This is not a state that you will arrive at, quote, someday. When you've leapt over a given number of hurdles, this is a state of beingness that is attainable in the present period and, in fact, is a state that most of you embody now from time to time. Many have become aware of moments where sensibilities are heightened, where the heart center is open and connected, and where somehow one is attuned to a level of wisdom and focus that goes beyond what one normally experiences. In these isolated moments, one's vibration has elevated to the extent that one is able to embody the higher levels of awareness and manifest the responses that would be the norm under those conditions. Thus, even though one would not in those moments have access to the benefit of a full theoretical understanding out of the underlying teachings, one would be able to apply those understandings instinctively in one's responses to actions and occurrences. Surely most who read these words have experienced moments where one has tapped into levels of clarity and perspective that are rarefied, and most have had experiences where one speaks with a level of wisdom that is at once profound and yet simple. In that moment, there is the utmost clarity on the issues in question, and one wonders in passing, quote, where the wisdom is coming from, for it transcends conscious mind. These isolated moments are a taste of the state of beingness toward which you journey. These are moments where you embody the elevated perspective of the enlightened aspect of your own being with whom you are bonding in increments. The process is not focused on a clearly demarcated goal line that you cross once and for all after a marathon run. This process is ongoing. There are quantum leaps in vibration and in the consciousness that accompanies it. And there are setbacks as one is given the opportunity upon opportunity to apply the understandings attained until the concepts are internalized. Not as newfound knowledge, but fully integrated as knowingness, as one is able to apply one's understanding consistently in one's day-to-day life. One is able to manifest the exquisite moments of clarity more and more consistently. Ultimately, the lucid levels of perception become the norm, and one's perspective stabilizes at the higher frequencies, permitting the more enlightened state of being to preside. It is to be expected that moments of profound clarity are interspersed with episodes of diminished response, where one's performance in a given action is less than elevated and reflective of the vibrational levels embodied in the moment. Do not fault yourself in these momentary setbacks. For full integration of the principles upon which you are working at the deepest level is a gradual and ongoing process. The testing conditions with which you are living in these times allow the principles in question to be fully integrated. The application of the understandings is given a full range of opportunity to be expressed as life experiences, and one is able to reach a place within where one can feel whether or not one is attuned at the higher frequencies and know when one is operating from higher end of one's energy spectrum and when one is not. With each choice made in every encounter, one reinforces the levels at which one is able to perform in one's day-to-day life. As the principles are integrated into one's response mechanisms and the reflex reactions of cultural conditioning are deleted, one emerges in a balanced, harmonious state that precludes the possibility of being drawn into encounters that would jeopardize those rarefied levels. The conscious sidestepping of questionable encounters and compromised environments help to reinforce one's heightened levels of attunement and one's ability to sustain those levels consistently. One becomes aware of a newfound self-protectedness, stemming not from fear but from love. With it comes a recognition of one's right to honor and hold exalted the sanctity of that state of being. One's priority becomes one in which the self is revered, and the maintenance of one's state of inner harmony outweighs any inclination to engage in encounters where conflict and discord would diminish that state. One becomes aware that the need to put forth one's viewpoint and to have it embraced by others is of less importance than maintaining the harmonious state within. A peaceful sense of allowance takes precedence, and one finds oneself responding with what could be called, quote, detached indifference more often than not. In this state, there are simply not the vested interests in certain issues that may have once been major, quote, triggers of emotional response throughout most of one's life. Now, such matters seem irrelevant. One takes on a distanced perspective with regard to the choices of others. And one realizes that meddling in the affairs of another has no place in this journey. Ultimately, one's choices are one's own. And while it is the cultural norm for so many of you to put forth your viewpoint on the actions and choices of others, this is an action that detracts from the focus on self, which is one of the greatest importance in the times at hand. You may feel compelled to share your more enlightened perspective with another, but know that when that perspective has not been requested and is clearly unwelcome, your wisdom will fall on deaf ears. Simply because you've attained clarity with regard to certain issues does not mean that others are ready to receive those insights. Each of you is on your own timetable. Each of you, essentially, is on your own unique journey. And even though many of you are making the journey hand in hand with another, the timing for the illumination of certain issues comes when the individual is ready to fully integrate those understandings and not before. You can expect to encounter the, quote, stonewall response of others who are simply not able to see the simple perfection of the perspective that you have attained. Resist the inclination to feel frustrated or disappointed when your newfound wisdom is not embraced by another with whom you are aligned on your journey. There's no place for expectation with regard to the vantage point of another being. Simply present your perspective with sincere and loving intent as it applies to your own life experience. And if the conditions are such that the seed of your truth falls on the fertile soil of another's consciousness, then you will have served as the messenger, carrying forth the energetic catalysts, conceptually, that initiates the process of internalization within that being, where the viewpoint presented from the standpoint of interfering in the free will or free choice of another, then the energetic charge carried in the message would have been dissipated in the transference and would not have been received or recognized as the pearl that it might well be. It is in your highest interests to refrain from any attempts to debate and to hammer your point home when the subject of discussion is the life issues of another being, regardless of how convinced you may be of the elevated nature of your own perspective. It is not for you to judge or to call another's attention to what may appear to you to be distorted or flawed perspective. Your responsibility is to retain that clarity with respect to your own process and your own life issues. That is all. Unless you are serving in these times as a teacher, and in that capacity your guidance has been sought by another, you are well advised to retain your internalized focus with regard to your, quote, revelations, and to reserve your opinions for the situations where they are invited and welcome. Your journey will carry you forth through the varied scenery of a radical new world in the times to come. And at the same time, your newly elevated vantage point on the same old sites will add a dramatically different outlook that makes it appear as though you were seeing the world for the very first time. That world is changing, and you are changing with it more rapidly than you can imagine. The task at hand is to take care of your own emerging consciousness by applying focused awareness on the potential repercussions of every interaction and every energy exchange with another. In so doing, you make the highest possible contribution to the collective and to the intimate circle of fellow travelers who walk beside you on the road to oneness. And that is the end of chapter 8. And how poignant and relevant this last part of chapter 8 really was, because I have found myself at that place so many different times. I want to say it honestly hasn't been in the last year or so where I felt compelled to hammer my point home because somebody had what I did perceive as a lesser elevated perspective of something. More times than not, it was very, very often where you feel like you've got such a perspective of the overview when you really back out of conflict and you can see the conflict happening from a mile away. It's like watching two people throw punches at each other from a distance. When you're in the fight, you don't get to see the fight. You don't see the value of it, the mistakes of it, and all that. When you're in the fight, you're in the fight. And when you're not in the fight, you have that luxury of that perspective of the overview. So when you've done that so many more times than not, and you've seen these conflicts, you feel like you've attained a higher level of perspective. And it's really hard at certain times to watch these conflicts continually happen, to watch people, I guess, blindly follow others that you know are deceitful, that are, I guess it's a matter of subjective perspective, but viewing good versus evil, it's like hot and cold. It's all a matter of perspective. But the people who you view to not be good, and you view others in having an aligned set of beliefs in that sort of evil way of thinking, you want to let them know, like, no, you're really thinking in a bad mindset. And it's very easy to engage in those conflicts. And it's so easy to want to take that red pill, using that Matrix analogy of the red pill of the ones who woke up, and the blue pill of the people who wanted to stay asleep, and want to shove that red pill down people's throats. But you can't. They have to come to you for that knowledge. And you can plant the seeds and really walk away. And it's really up to them to sow those seeds and let them grow and nurture them. So there's really no amount of hammering home in any argument or circumstance that you can really do when someone is polarized against a frame of thought that you might have. And this chapter was very much diving into that, and I very much appreciate that perspective. It's been a while since I've read this particular chapter as well. And it's definitely far before the last year that I've had of where I've changed that perspective of just throwing something out there, watching somebody kind of, debate it and just saying, oh, okay, well, that's your perspective. And, I guess you're right. You can have whatever perspective you want. And it nullifies the argument. It pulls you out of it. It leaves you with a sense of, I guess, a lack of fulfillment, because you're really hoping that you people walk away from a situation a little bit more informed and enlightened. But ultimately, if they want to be, they'll come to you. And that's what this chapter is saying. So another great set of chapters in a great book. Again, if you want to get your copy of this, head to Oneness website and check out the deals that she has. And we will be diving into this much more frequently in 2024 in the months to come. So stay tuned for those. For everybody else who's just tuning in, I will, again, link those episodes in the show notes so you can go back and listen from the beginning. But I appreciate every single one of you who takes the information in this and integrates it into your life. It is definitely a game changer for how you experience life and for how you interact with others in this crazy world that we live in. So until next time, be well, and thank you for listening. See you next time.